Don't you wish you had a crystal ball around the time you were diagnosed with IBM? To understand why a chronic illness happens, we need to understand something about how our body works. Our organs include the heart, lungs, brain, blood vessels, bones, and muscles. Cells are the building blocks of tissues and organs, in fact, everything in our body. For a single muscle cell to remain alive and function normally, three things must happen. It must be nourished, receive oxygen, and get rid of waste products. If anything goes wrong with any of these functions, the cell can become diseased. If cells are restricted from getting nourishment or oxygen, or they prematurely get destroyed and are not replenished, our muscles suffer and a slow loss in functionality will follow. Welcome to this 97th IB Myositis channel episode. In this episode, I will attempt to communicate some very important methods for IBMers and caregivers, and when successfully implemented, will exhibit how to cope with this progressive skeletal muscle disease called inclusion body myositis, or IBM. You know the routine. Hit that thumbs up button for this episode, and please subscribe if you haven't done so during a previous episode. Hundreds of human behavior studies to learn how people change or why they don't change have been done. Here's what has been learned. Most people change by themselves when they're ready. Yes, our caregivers, doctors, and Facebook groups coax, persuade, nag, and otherwise try to assist people to change their lifestyles and habits. You probably don't need a crystal ball to tell you that if you have IBM and have already fallen once, you will probably fall again. But perhaps your crystal ball won't tell you about the serious injury that may occur during the fall. But most people change when they are good and ready and without much help from others. Change is not an all or nothing process. Change happens in small steps, just like IBM slowly affects us. Most of us think of change as occurring one step at a time. Each step is an improvement over the one before it. When a power chair is obtained, the user will generally benefit from some mobility training to optimize driving efficiency. Providing a power wheelchair without mobility training is like putting a teenager behind the wheel without driver's training. A teenager has spent countless hours as a passenger in a vehicle driven by someone else, so he or she should have picked up on some of the basics, but a power chair user has not been afforded that luxury, so the self-learning curve may be steep for some. Like anything else, being knowledgeable of what your power chair can do and what the controls do are prerequisites that can only be obtained by reading the manual and practicing. IBMers have to change over time as they have no other choice. For example, most people who accept the use of a power chair only do so after a series of falls and injuries, some possibly severe. After an IBM fall occurs, the next few days, weeks, or months may be required for recuperation time and not a time when you can practice those daily life activities you want to do. Emphasis placed on doing the required things to avoid falling, such as getting a power chair sooner, may be an appropriate plan in bettering your life with IBM. The keys that I use in an increasing number of challenging IBM situations are: Number 1, define the problem. 2, decide what the final result should be. 3, determine how I'm going to do it. And 4, maybe learn a new set of skills and practice them until you've mastered them. Managing IBM, like managing a family or a business, is a complex undertaking. There are many twists, turns, and mid-course corrections. By learning certain self-management skills, we can ease the problems of living with our condition. Success in chronic disease self-management is the same. In fact, mastering those new methods or skills will be one of the most important tasks of your new IBM life. Let's use the power chair decision as a case example. Number 1. Define the problem. I will probably continue to fall occasionally and could hurt myself when continuing to walk inside or out of my home. Riding on a power chair will be safer and therefore better for me and my caregiver and give me the opportunity to visit more places for longer times. Number 2. Define what the final output should be. Let's drastically reduce the number of falls inside and out of my home that could result in serious injury. Accepting the power chair won't eliminate all falls because there's ample opportunity for something to go wrong during a transfer to or from the power chair. Number 3. How am I going to do it? I'm going to adapt the next higher level of mobility device, even if this is with the use of a mobility power chair. I started with a visit to my family doctor to get the Medicare process started. Prior to getting that done, I had purchased used chairs with elevating seats. My scooter seat could also be raised to assist standing up from it. Number 4. The learning of new skills. Adapt all safety instructions of the new device into my daily use. All mobility devices require practice to become proficient operators to avoid home wall and doorway damage reported by some new power chair drivers. Reading the owner's manual is also an excellent way to get started. Another issue for me was how the power chair would get transported. I weighed all the available options of buying a hoist to place the power chair in the back of my truck or purchase a lift that attached to the receiver hitch or use a trailer. I recognized all of those alternatives were short-term fixes for a long-term muscle disease, so I saved those dollars to help pay for a ramp van. If IBM were only an acute disease, a full recovery would usually be the expectation. But in contrast, a chronic illness like IBM leads to more symptoms and loss of physical functioning in the long haul. Our physical functionality can be measured with a self-administered FRS or Functional Rating Scale survey that in the past I've previously recommended at least taking once a year, although taking it more than once a year doesn't do any harm. Refer to the 5th and 6th episode on this IB Myositis channel for more information about the Functional Rating Scale survey. A copy of the survey itself can be found in the Files section of the Myositis Support and Understanding Facebook page. If you are expecting me to tell you exactly what caused your IBM, I regret to inform you that would be far above my ability and pay scale. In fact, the difficulty in even identifying which came first, the chicken or the egg, in IBM has stumped even the best IBM medical professionals and research experts. Yes, you will feel better when you exercise, eat well, and keep regular sleeping hours, and take time to relax, and all those other common sense behaviors that anyone of any pay grade should recognize. But there's also evidence that the feelings of self-confidence and control over your life that come from making any successful change might improve your health as well. As people age or develop a chronic illness, physical abilities and self-image usually decline. For many people, it is discouraging to find that they can't do what they used to do or want to do. By changing or improving any one area of your life, whether it is losing some unwanted weight or learning a new skill, you regain an increased sense of worth. By focusing on what you can do rather than what you cannot do, you're more likely to lead a more positive and happier life. Just as exercise helps muscles not affected by IBM compensate for the ones that are not affected by IBM, learning a new skill may help compensate and build some optimism, energy, and self-worth. We can accomplish a lot with problem solving, realistic decision making, and action planning. If you can grasp the meaning of self-management, the tasks involved with it, and the key self-management tools previously mentioned, you are ready to learn about other tools that will make you a successful self-manager. IBMers must never lose sight of planning for their futures, and when I say futures, I mean as much as 5 to 15 years ahead. And you'll have to think of secondary problems associated with fixing that previously mentioned problem, like falling down. To successfully use a cane to a power chair, you'll also have to consider the width between pieces of furniture and the width of doorways wherever you intend to use your mobility aid. How will I access my bathroom amenities in the near future when I can still transfer from the power chair to the toilet or shower? And what is the next step to think about when transferring becomes a problem? When I'm confined to a power chair, do I have to plan for a secondary exit from my home in case of an emergency? If I fall while transferring, how will help be contacted? Your self-management action plan does not stop the day you decide on the power chair we used in the previous example. Your home needs to be equipped to handle the size and loads of the power chair with you sitting in it. A typical power chair with an elevated seat weighs between 425 and 450 pounds, depending on how it's accessorized. Add your weight to the power chair's estimate weight, and you will be in the ballpark to specify any ramping you will need to drive in and out of your home. You might even think about your living room floors capable of supporting your weight sitting on the weight of your lift chair recliner and your 450-pound wheelchair sitting close to it. Egads, there's a lot to think about that takes an enormous amount of planning. The old saying, practice makes perfect, must be adopted in the IBM life. We are creatures of repetitive actions that work for us, and we need to eliminate actions that might endanger our already shaken lives. That may include not only the power chair decision, but when to stop driving an automobile on the streets, or when to stop golfing when the golf club goes further than the ball, as I've experienced in my past. The old saying, practice makes perfect, must be adopted in the IBM life. We are creatures of repetitive actions that work for us, and a driveway or a parking lot is a great place to set up a small obstacle course using some small blocks of wood as a new power chair operator. You will be surprised how much better your operating a power chair will increase with just a little practice. IBM can be a very scary place for many of us. In closing this episode, I encourage anyone diagnosed with IBM to adapt to the need of ever-changing conditions and the ability to learn about and manage their IBM disability. Realizing that a cure that will reverse any damage by IBM may not be readily available should make the idea of spending time on your self-management plan well worth its while. Is IBM scary? Yes, it can be, but can be less scary with the right planning. Get planning, my IBM friends.